Okay, well, hello everyone. This is Art from Bookshelf Odyssey, and I have a special guest on today. And if you're watching the video on BookTube, I'm the one who probably needs to be introduced compared to my next guest. We have Kate Howe on the show today. For those in the podcast, she's a booktuber and a book influencer, I guess. I don't know, coming up with a good label for you, Kate. But she's going to be, she's coming on today to talk about some cozy winter reads that'll be perfect for the Christmas time and winter time and all the months we have coming with snow and cold weather. So Kate, welcome to the Bookshelf Odyssey.
Thank you for having me. It is a delight to be here.
Yeah, your channel is one of the first BookTube channels I found. And I started watching them several years ago. So I feel like I'm in the presence of a celebrity here. So
it is kind of surreal when you do, because I've had several booktubers that I've spoken with, online, but then a few I've met in person and several I've met on Zoom. And it's kind of like, wow, you're just doing your everyday life like I do.
Yep. Usually when I talk to the YouTube screen, the YouTubers don't talk back to me. So that's a great book. What are you talking about? All right. But I have enjoyed a lot of the books that you've recommended. And so I think our tastes are more similar than not. So we shouldn't get into any arguments today, I think. So
I think so. I do have a bit of a dysfunctional relationship with Dickens, but the books that I love by him, I really, really love. So there's mostly positivity regarding him.
Okay, good. All right, we can keep this conversation going then. Okay. Well, to start things off, tell us a little bit about yourself for those who don't know you. How did you get into reading? Has it always been a lifelong passion of yours?
Yeah, so I think as long as I've been able to read, I have loved it. One of the great, tragedies of my life, though, is that I kind of have amnesia about a lot of the books that I read as a child. I have a few specific books that I'm like, yes, I really remember my reading experience of that. But a lot of it has left me. So I have, asked my dad, what did you read aloud to me? And one that he said that I was kind of too cool for school when he first was reading it aloud to my younger siblings was The Hobbit. But then I kept lingering longer in the room as he would read. And then eventually I just was all in, sitting and listening. And then as a teenager, I just really kept enjoying reading. I remember Harry Potter was a big thing. And even in college, I would make time to read for leisure. But I did not start reading voraciously until I became a stay-at-home parent, where just the days all can blend together and you're doing the same tasks over and over again. You're keeping these little people alive and it is all good and important work, but it can be a bit mind-numbing at times. And so I found that I had never read as much in my life as when I was just home with a baby for the first time. And it really has become a rising ceiling, kind of the amount that I have been reading. And I do go through phases where sometimes I will just pick TV over books, and that's fine. But in general, I feel the most rewarded when I read a great book. So as my kids get older too, it's fun now. My older son, Peter, he's 7 and he's old enough to listen to middle grade books read aloud. So we're starting to have fun sharing some of those reading experiences together.
Mm-hmm. So how old were you when you were listening to The Hobbit, or your dad was reading it, you said?
I think my guess is probably around 10, or between 10 and 12, because I'm thinking my youngest sibling was 6 years younger than me. So I don't think as a 4-year-old he would have sat through that, but maybe as a 6-year-old he would have sat down for The Hobbit. But The Hobbit does have a very special place in my heart. And I'm very excited because we have plans when we drive out to see my husband's family at Christmas time. we have the new Andy Serkis narrated The Hobbit. And so we're going to listen to that. It is a longer drive. It's like 5 hours one way. So that will be really a treat because my husband loves the Lord of the Rings more than I do. So that will be fun.
That I listened to almost as soon as it was available to buy. And it's really well done. It is really well done.
It's unbelievable. And my husband's reaction when he heard the sample was, that jerk, now he's going to ruin any other narrator for me in comparison. Just that gravelly quality that he has. And then, I mean, it's the Smeagol voice. So.
Right. I did. And then he just released the trilogy of Lord of the Rings. And so I'm waiting till after Christmas to start on that one. But
I'm stuck in the Two Towers, and I already had I can't remember his name, but the audiobooks that have been around for decades. But they're cozy, but he is a bit monotone. His characters don't sound that different. So I was like, okay, I'm definitely getting the Andy Serkis one. So once I don't know, finish a few other books, I want to finish the Two Towers and then dive into Return of the King.
My wife was an avid reader, or she still is, and I read a lot, but she runs circles around me. It's amazing. And but I think what really, the book that got her into reading was The Hobbit.
Really?
They couldn't keep, she would just tear through books as a kid, and finally her dad says, here, read this, gives her The Hobbit. And she read it and she said, is, more, is there more like this, kind of thing. And then she read, so he gave her the Lord of the Rings. And I think she read up until about the part about midway or so, where I think it was the point where you think Frodo's dead, from the spider and everything. And she got so scared. She's like, I couldn't finish it. I went weeks without touching it, and I didn't want to know what would happen. And but finally, she just got the courage up and went back into it. And
wow.
And then I didn't read those books until an adult.
I didn't either.
So I don't have quite the emotional attachment that some do. And I'm just going to throw out a controversial statement. I like the movies better.
The movies are excellent. I'm not that offended. The only thing about the movies that really bothers me, because I came into the book series having watched the movies, so many times, is there is not this kind of Sam versus Gollum power struggle where Frodo is like stuck with his loyalties, because it's such a stressful part of the movie. And then I read the books and I'm like, you didn't even have to have that added stress. So I was frustrated with that. But the boys and I we just finished listening to Letters from Father Christmas, which are just these really sweet letters that Tolkien wrote like he was Father Christmas to his children. And the audiobook is really charming. Derek, is it Jacoby? I'm not sure how you're supposed to say his last name.
Jacoby?
Yeah.
I know who you're talking about.
Yeah. So he reads them, and there's characters like there's the North Polar Bear, and it was just altogether charming and whimsical. And just as you see in, the Lord of the Rings trilogy and The Hobbit, he just has such a deep love for story. And it just really comes through.
Yeah, definitely. I was looking for a book here real quick. Hold on a second. I have a children's book called Artie the Smartie, and it's about a little fish, and it was my favorite book as a kid, and now I can't find it. I know it's here somewhere. But, it's not where I thought it was, but anyway, that's the book I remember reading, one of several when I was young, and that's the one I would read over and over again because it had my name on it. So that was really neat, seeing my name in print. Like that's cool. And anyway, it's this little story of a fish that wants to make a big splash, and he keeps trying to jump, and it's all these little ripples. So he goes on this adventure into the deep ocean, gets swallowed by a fish or a whale. And so then he tickles the inside of the whale's mouth. So the whale sneezes him out. And as a result, he makes this huge splash as
Oh,
and
well,
that's the story. It's simple.
that's so fun. But as you know, my younger son is named Arthur, so I should get that for my Arthur. I think he would get a kick out of that.
Yeah, yeah. It's I don't know if they have any like modern printings or anything. The copy I have is from the 60s or 70s, I think.
Oh, wow.
But yeah, it was fun, and I get nostalgia just looking at it. But I know it's here somewhere. I'll find it. Yeah.
Now I did just realize I do have one other vivid reading memory from childhood, and there was one or a couple different summers. We lived in Mississippi when I was growing up, and my dad's family lived in New York State, and my mom's family lived in South Carolina. So we would do this massive road trip from Mississippi to up to New York State, and then down to South Carolina, and then down to further to Mississippi. And we listened to the whole Henry Huggins series, audiobooks. And so those books, I have always been much more like Henry Huggins kind of fan than Ramona Quimby. And I just blame it on those audiobooks, just were done so well. And I just find Beverly Cleary's writing so endearing. So yeah, I'm very fond of those books.
Yeah. Well, it's funny how the books that really have made the most impact are ones that we've heard out loud, maybe, that we've been read aloud. That's a thing that inspired me to read. It is being read aloud to. I read aloud to my kids. Again, one of the big books we tackled was The Hobbit. I didn't even plan to talk about Tolkien so much today, but this is great. No, but I think my boys were about 8 and 6 or so, and it can be a hard book to get through. And I didn't have any problem with my oldest. He's always been reading outside of his grade level. But what I had them do is, as they sat and listened, and this was my wife's idea, that she wanted them to draw a picture of what I was reading, to kind of help them stay engaged with the story that might be difficult for them to understand. So I've got some of those pictures somewhere in storage now that one of them picked up on. It's almost like a throwaway line of the rock monsters fighting in the mountains, but he drew this big picture of these rock monsters fighting. And then another, they were just so drawn by the idea of a hobbit hole. They would draw these detailed pictures of houses underground and all these plans and everything. It's really neat. And
how fun.
Yeah, it was a fun way to, keep their attention too. If there was a concept or something they didn't really understand.
Yes.
Somehow the process of trying to draw it out kind of helped them with that. So
and that is very there's certain like schools of thought within homeschooling, and that is very much like doing the hands-on activity while they're listening to reading. I think it's one thing, you say, I want my children to cultivate a love of reading, and you put a stack of picture books with them before they can read and be like, look at these and you'll like to read, but it's a much different thing to sit. These books are wonderful. Let's read this together is a very, very different thing.
Yeah. Well, and as a parent, I'm sure you've got those kids' books you have memorized because you wanted to read them so much. So.
Yes. The Little Blue Truck and the Pout Pout Fish are the two that my husband and I, we quote them to each other just in our daily lives.
Yeah. There were a couple that I had to read so much. I just started like, all right, I got to do something. So I was starting to make voices, and just pretending I'm an actor here. Okay. I gotta, but yeah, my middle son, he had the Very Hungry Caterpillar read to him so much that he had it memorized before he could even read.
That's so funny.
We have a video of him reading it, turning the pages and everything, and he's getting the words all right on the right page, but he has no idea how to read. So
that's awesome.
It's wonderful. Yeah. All right. So how did, like I said, you've been a presence on BookTube for quite a while. And for those who don't know, that's basically the bookish community on YouTube, similar to Bookstagram or Book Talk and all the other book Twitter. I don't know what they call themselves, but I'm still trying to learn all this stuff. So, well, how did you get started making videos for YouTube?
Yeah.
YouTube?
So I just, when I started reading voraciously around the time when my son, I think, was 3 months old, I was just thinking, I wonder, could it be that people make videos about books on YouTube? Like people have YouTube channels. And so I happened upon Reagan from Peru's project, her channel. And we do have some reading taste in common. So it was just, I mean, this amazing discovery to find this person who just did video after video about books. But she doesn't quite read some of the subgenres that I like. Like I love mysteries and I love classics. And we both, you and I love Victorian literature. And so I went down the rabbit hole and kept finding more and more and more channels. And so I watched as an observer for about maybe 9 months. And then I just took the plunge and I started making videos. And the really special thing about BookTube is that you kind of have your people when you start your channel. You know how to kind of how to build community. Just you're commenting on friends' videos, and then, oh, hey, I see you're reading that book. I was wanting to read it. Could we read it together? And so there's all sorts of ways that you can read books together. People call it buddy read. And so some people like to just message back and forth text. Voxer is an app that I love and adore, where you can leave voice messages. But then as we have come into 2021, I've really loved hosting book discussions on Zoom, because it is like getting to meet with a book club, but from the comfort of your living room.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm hoping to do some of those this next year once
Excellent.
I get my feet wet. Yeah. But yeah, I had a similar thought when I found it. I may have come across the name in an article somewhere or something. And I was thinking, you mean there are people who just talk about books on a video? Where is this, where is this heaven? And yeah, I think, so I just went and searched, I don't remember what it was, but I remember one of the first channels that popped up was Books and Things, and with Katie. And I'm like, wow, the YouTube algorithm really knows me well. It's a reader who loves Charles Dickens. That's my that's my channel.
Oh, so fun.
Yeah. But yeah, so that I started off watching her, and then through that I found your channels very early on, and lots of others. So yeah, it's been great. And I wanted to start a channel more than I don't know, a year or two or more ago, but always have those excuses and everything. And then I started podcasting last year, and kind of thinking, all right, let me get through this first year, and then next year I'll start just have goals and things to start building on. So I've really enjoyed it immensely.
That's awesome.
Yeah, it's a great community. So if anyone watching or listening keeps thinking I should do that, you should just do it. Just jump in and do it.
Just do it. And it's very welcoming. And and also I still film on my phone. Like, you don't have to have lots of bells and whistles. You can if you want to, but it's not a necessity to have a channel. Right.
I'm filming this on my laptop. Just, it comes, the little grainy video or webcam there, but my videos I film on my phone as well. And I have a nicer microphone, but that's because I podcast, but you don't need it either. I mean, I'm surprised how well, this microphone picks up even. So
yes.
Yeah. All right. Well, let's, before the time is even over, I've got all afternoon. So, but let's talk about why you're even here today. I wanted to just collaborate with you to talk about, have you bring some cozy reads for us as we are facing a winter, and it might be a long and cold one, depending on where you live. And it's, for me, it's my favorite time of year to hunker down and read through stacks of books. So I asked if you had some cozy reads you could recommend to us. I think you had about 10.
Yes,
Okay.
It was a very, very challenging task, but I did it.
Yeah.
And I was saying to some friends, this is in the lead up to Victober, which is, for anyone that doesn't know, it's Victorian October, when people celebrate reading Victorian literature in October, whether it be one short story or several novels, whatever you want to do. That fall is the new year for a reader. So, we're ready. We want all those atmospheric kind of reads for fall, kind of like maybe scary, and then even scary reads in wintertime, but also just coziness. So I do think a lot of readers get really excited about reading in wintertime. And I find, ironically, summer reading is such a thing when you're a kid, but my summers, I'm usually bordering on a reading slump. So I'm just going to really lean into the fall and winter reading. So the first, I do have visuals for some of them, for those of you that are watching this on YouTube. So the first, though, I don't have a visual for, and that is The Christmas Hirelings by Mary Elizabeth Braddon. And this is a little Christmas novella. I think it is around 3 hours long on audio. I have only listened to it on audio, so I've never read a physical copy of it. But this, to me, should be as well known as A Christmas Carol. It is about this old curmudgeon who lives in a big, beautiful house, basically by himself and with some servants. And he has some, he has something in his past that has made him very jaded. You don't know what it is, but there's some pain there. But he does have a friend who kind of, despite his curmudgeonliness, perseveres in being his friend and says, you know what, you're going to be all lonely on Christmas. You have this big, beautiful house that's just going to waste. What are you going to do for Christmas? I'm going to bring you some hirelings, some children, to make Christmas time jolly and merry here. And so he brings these children, and one of the children in particular just melts the ice around this old curmudgeon's heart. And I love that it's full of Christmas festivities, and is just entirely domestic and warm and kind of all of the feelings that you want at Christmas time. So I have listened to the audiobook narrated by Richard Armitage, and he is just delightful for reading aloud books.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a great story. I covered it on my Christmas podcast a couple months ago and read it in installments. And I had read it before. Well, I had listened to it on audio, and some books take me a couple of tries to really get it. But something about this last process of just slowing down and listening, reading it, and then when I go back through and edit, I'm reading it through a couple of different times by the end of it, and I was just blown away. Like, this is a really good story. And if you love Victorian literature, it has just about every hallmark of a Victorian novel all compressed in one little novella.
Yes. What I love too is even Ebenezer Scrooge is referenced in it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's fun now that since you've read it aloud, you really know it in and out.
Right. Right.
Having read it that much.
Yeah.
And also, for those that like kind of mysteries and sensational novels, the author Mary Elizabeth Braddon has a huge catalog, and I really, really loved several of her books. So slowly I'll read more and more of her.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And then you're going to be hosting a Zoom discussion on that book.
Yes.
Right?
On my Patreon.
On Patreon. Okay.
Yes. So it is, I think, 2 weeks from when we're recording this. That weekend, I'm hosting a couple different discussions. So I'm looking forward to discussing it.
Yeah, I'm hoping to get to one of those. One of those times should work. So
awesome. Yeah. That would be great.
All right. Well, that's we're off to a good start. That's a great choice. What else?
Thank you. Okay, so then continuing on, not all of the books are Christmassy, but this is another Christmassy one. So this is Miss Reed, her Christmas at Fairacre collection, but my favorite out of this is The Christmas Mouse. And it's funny because one December, I called my dad on the phone, and he is a big reader. And I said, Dad, I want a Christmas story where they live in the English countryside in cozy little houses. And on Christmas Eve, they go to, midnight mass in a church with a red door. And I want it to be a little village. And he's like, oh yeah, Miss Reed. And I was like, everything that I'm I'm wanting. It exists in a book. So The Christmas Mouse is I think it's a novella. And there is a woman whose husband passed away. She's older. She's, I think, mid-70s. And her daughter-in-law, who was married to her son, the son passed away, and the daughter-in-law has 2 children. So the mother-in-law, daughter-in-law, and then the 2 little girls are all living in a house together. And the mother-in-law and the daughter-in-law are kind of sad. The men in their life have passed away, but they're trying to make the best of it for Christmas. And what I love is there's just so much of Christmas preparations and baking and just taking a moment to sit and savor those kind of everyday joys. And there's a lot of heart in it too. So I think it's only around 150 pages. It is not long. So yes, Miss Reed has some great Christmassy kind of books.
Well, that sounds fun. I haven't heard of those before, so that's great.
They're fun. Yeah, they're really fun. So then we move on to an author who is, she's just amazing. So Elizabeth Goudge is her name. And she's an author that I think conveys her faith really organically in her books. Like, it does not feel saccharine. It doesn't feel forced. And it's just put in such a profound and poignant way. What does your faith mean to you kind of in everyday life? And also sometimes characters have to make big choices. But my favorite of hers, well, there's a few, but I'm holding up the first in the Elliott family trilogy. So it is about this family that lives in this big, beautiful house. I'm not even sure what part of the country it is in England, but it is right after World War II. And you just really get to know this family intimately. And there are 3 installments. And it starts out with a lot of tension in the family over someone being in love with someone else, and the matriarch of the family very much not approving, and how this family deals with that. But there's just I love the children in this feel very childlike, and it's really fun. In the next one, which is called Pilgrim's Inn, they go to all this trouble to put on this nativity play. So what I like about her books is pretty much in all of her books, there is a Christmas scene, even if they aren't Christmas books. So that's fun. You get a little bit of Christmas sparkle, no matter what book that you're reading. So then in the wintertime also, I really like to hunker down with mysteries. I like to read mysteries all year, I'll be honest, but I definitely make sure to put a focus on them. And the month of December, I'm one of the hosts of Cloak and Dagger Christmas, we call it, where we just celebrate reading mysteries in December. And one of the most fun mysteries that I read was Strong Poison by Dorothy Sayers. So she was a Golden Age author, and she has a series featuring Lord Peter Whimsey. So it's interesting to have kind of this more, sleuth with more social cachet than maybe your amateur sleuth or your working class police detective. And they're just incredibly clever. Her dialogue is I would call it sparkling. And one of the really fun aspects of Strong Poison is when Lord Peter Whimsey meets Harriet Vane, who is on trial. She is suspected of murder, and the sparks fly immediately between them. Many people have said that Harriet Vane was Dorothy Sayers kind of writing herself into the mystery series. And then, so I'm hoping at some point, this is supposed to be the creme de la creme of the series, Gaudy Night, or Gaudy. I always say Gaudy because that's how we would say it now, but Gaudy is, I think, how you're supposed to say it, because it's a different kind of thing. It's a kind of formal party that they're having. It's called a Gaudy. And this is where I think kind of the fate of Harriet Vane and Lord Peter is really sealed in this, but it's really lengthy. I mean, especially for like a Golden Age mystery, it's close to 500 pages. So there's a big mystery that's also happening, and it takes place in Oxford for those that like that setting. So I'm hoping at some point to get to that. But yes, her writing is very clever. Yeah.
I haven't read any of hers yet. I know I tried starting with the first one. Is it Whose Body?
Yes.
And I didn't get through it, but I remember at the time I was reading like several things at once, and sometimes you get too overloaded and you think, all right, this isn't the right time for it. Yeah.
Yeah. Sometimes you just know you need to step away. I do struggle actually with some of her books. The ones that I really like are where Laura Peter and Harriet Vane are there together. So that's why I'm really excited for Goudy Night. Whose Body, I think it got around 3 stars for me. One thing I struggle with Golden Age mysteries is I feel sometimes like I'm at arm's length, held at arm's length from the characters, whereas more modern mysteries, I feel like you delve really into the characters. Mm-hmm. So that's actually a good segue then into my favorite Golden Age author, who is talked about so much less than Agatha Christie or Dorothy Sayers, and that is Josephine Tay. So she has 2 in particular that I think are just marvelous. The first is Daughter of Time. That could possibly be her most iconic. It's basically a Rear Window as a book, except it's a crime from the past. So this man is stuck in hospital, the detective, and Alan Grant, and he's really, really incredibly bored. And he asks his assistant to bring in some books, and he sees this picture of Richard III and says, this picture intrigues me about him, this man who has been so vilified in history, the man who locked the little boys in the tower, which is whoever did that crime. It's a dreadful, dreadful thing, locking these little boys in the tower just to get the throne. And so he investigates more into it. And so I don't know if she thinks that he actually was innocent or she's just writing an interesting book, but it really did make me think like, maybe we don't know for sure that Richard III did that. But the reason also I like her so much is that I just get on with her writing style. So even if it's a slower book, I can very much enjoy it. This summer, I read Miss Pym Disposes, which is about Miss Pym, who is a visiting lecturer at an all-girls college. And nothing happens for 75% of the book. And I still could not put it down because I love her writing style. And you're really getting into the psychology of all these girls and kind of the power dynamics that are there. And then a lot of things happen the last 25%. And I had a huge book hangover and I still don't know what I think about the ending. So it's very much a slow burner.
Yeah, I know I've read one book by her. And I think it might've been that one, Mrs. Pym Disposes. Or Deposes?
Disposes, yeah.
Disposes. Okay, yeah. I don't know. Is that an ongoing character she writes, or is that just
It's just a standalone.
Okay, so that's the one I read because that setup was familiar. But I can't remember what I thought of it though. So
yeah.
I know she's on my list of authors to read more of. So I must have liked it enough to want to check her out more. So
nice. Well, if you can't remember it, that's not a great sign, but then maybe Daughter of Time would be a hit with you.
Yeah, that one sounds really interesting. It's for sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I'm going to check that one out.
Awesome. Okay. And then books just so incredibly near and dear to my heart. And these are some that I remember reading in childhood and have had a lasting impression. And that is the Betsy Tacy series by Maud Hart Lovelace. And I have just a slight chip on my shoulder about this series not being as well known as Little Women or Anne of Green Gables, because I argue actually the sequels to Little Women, Little Men, and Jo's Boys, I don't know anyone that argues that they're as good as Little Women. And I know Anne fans kind of are like, yeah, some of the books in the middle aren't as consistently good. Whereas I think the Betsy Tacy series is just incredibly consistently good throughout the series. It starts when Betsy is 5 and she meets her best friend Tacy at her birthday party, and they are inseparable after that. And these take a lot of elements from the author Maud Hart Lovelace's real life. She did have a Tacy in her life, and then later on they meet Tib, and she had a Tib. And it's set in Deep Valley, which is actually Mankato, Minnesota. They have Betsy and Tacy's houses. The Betsy Tacy Society has them as museums that you can visit. And it follows Betsy all the way through when she gets married in Betsy's Wedding, which might be my favorite of the series. And I found out apparently an alternate title was Mrs. Betsy, which I thought was the sweetest sounding name. And then, so I am actually in the midst of rereading the series. So up next for me is Betsy and the Great World, where she travels around after she is through with high school and doesn't want to go to college, doesn't know what she wants to do. So she does some traveling. And but Betsy is very much the social butterfly. And so I think some readers are like, that's not my personality at all. So then, little plug here, I started the Kindred Spirits Club, and we're going to be reading aloud we're going to be reading Emily of Deep Valley. And so this is set in the same world as, it's set in Deep Valley, and you hear a bit about Betsy in it, but it is a standalone book. And Emily, the reason that I love this book is because it is about someone who very much feels forgotten and left behind. The rest of her classmates have graduated, and she's just living this quiet life with her grandfather, and how you can really, your attitude can change how you feel about your circumstances. And so she kind of takes it upon herself. She musters her wits, as the phrase says in the book. And it's really, really special. So I just love Maud Hart Lovelace's writing, and her writing, like, I get a little like Christmas feeling whenever I read her books. Mm-hmm. And yes, so
what's the intended age group? Group for that?
Yeah, so I think I'd say young adult, although I think you can start a lot earlier, because the very first book, Betsy Tacy, I mean, I think an 8-year-old, a competent reading 8-year-old could read it. So the reader grows with Betsy. And the one thing that I'm hesitant when I recommend them is that the writing is very simplistic at the beginning. So I kind of want people to start with the high school books. So, but I love it. So.
Yeah. Now, did you, maybe you said that, but when did you start reading those books? And because you do a lot of videos on those books too, don't you?
I do. Yeah. Okay. I am obsessed. Yeah. I mean, I started reading them, I think probably around 8 was when I read the first one. And then I remember in high school just being so enamored with Joe Willard is the name of the boy he's like the interest. She kind of dates different boys. And also dating was just viewed a lot differently then. And so, yeah, I think I started when I was around 8 and then just have reread them ever since.
Yeah. Oh, great. I love it. Those books you can take with you from childhood to adult.
Yes.
They're so good.
Because some are like, you go back to them and you're like, well, it was nice loving it when I was little.
Yeah. Like, this is awful. Yes. I'm being honest. Yeah.
Okay. So then some more, just vintage charm. And that is the Melendi Family Quartet by Elizabeth N. Wright is her name. I grew up reading her Gone Away Lake and Return to Gone Away Lake. I did not know about this series, and I actually like it better. But I have only read the first 2. I came to these as an adult, and I love them so much. So I think for people that you didn't read these as children, you don't have to. And their father is he a professor? I cannot remember. But they live in New York City, and their father is a widower, and then they have a housekeeper who they call Cuffy, and I cannot remember why. It's a nickname for something. But there's 4 children, and the first book, The Saturdays, they all pool their allowance, and then each Saturday, one of the kids goes for kind of yes day, using the money. They get to pick whatever they want. And then the 4-story mistake, they move into this house that has this kind of accidental 4th story to it, hence the title. But it's just, I love how each child has very much their own personality, and they're just really, really funny and witty books, and just that kind of larger than life feel to them. So really fun series. And I'm very excited these are great audiobooks. And so I have been listening to the series with my 7-year-old, and we have both read the first 2 and we want to continue on.
It's great. Yeah. I haven't heard of those either. So my evil plan to extend my TBR list is working here.
Your evil plan.
That's right.
You know what? I just say, wouldn't it be the scariest thing in the world as a reader to run out of books? Mm-hmm. So just embrace it. And I mean, it is hard sometimes, like, well, what do I actually want to read next? But yeah, there's just so many good ones.
Oh yeah. And you come to the realization you're never going to read them all. It's
never.
Sad as that makes me.
I know. I know. Well, that's why I'm just an extremely diligent DNFer, like do not finish, for those that don't know that abbreviation. If I'm not enjoying it, like it is not serving my time, and you can always come back to it. You can always say later, I should try that again. Although I do kind of push back against that rule when it comes to a classic, because if I'm going to get a great reward from reading it, I'm willing to really labor over it. But something contemporary, I say goodbye very easily.
Yep. Boy, that's something I learned to do just since starting watching YouTube or booktube videos. This whole concept of, wait, I don't have to finish this, even if it's a classic.
I haven't signed a contract giving the rights of my firstborn away if I don't finish it.
Right. And yeah, and especially the last couple of years, I've been just downright vicious for DNFing a book. I think one, I didn't even make it through the first page, and I'm just like, nope, this isn't going to work.
See, and that's what happens the more you read. You can tell instantly sometimes, like you have kind of reader red flags. Like, I know this is a pet peeve of mine, and it could be something that it's not poor writing, but you just know yourself as a reader. You're like, oh, all right, moving on.
Yeah, sorry, I'm keep sliding over because I've got the sun shining right in my face here. So
could you pull down blinds? Would it help?
No, we don't have any on those windows.
Oh, okay.
I tried to put something in the window, but it's not working so well.
Alas.
Right. Oh, there we go.
There we go.
That's a little better. But yeah, also learning to say this is not for me, or this is not for me right now, is such an important distinction, because that's what I did with Dickens. I've told this story on a podcast or sometime, but I started reading Great Expectations around the age of 13 or 14 because I saw a trailer for it or heard it on the radio and for a mini series that was out, and I thought, wow, that sounds really amazing. Mm-hmm. And I kind of knew his name connected to A Christmas Carol. I knew that through movies only at the time, but I started reading it, and it was really hard reading. I mean, it was the hardest reading I'd ever had at that time. And I said, all right, I made it through, I don't know, like the first 6 or 7 chapters and really liked it. But I said, I need to come back to this when I'm older, and I wanted to. I was like, I want to read this. I want to like this, but it's too hard for me right now. So let me come back to it. And sure enough, eventually I read A Christmas Carol by Dickens, and then kind of read him for a while. And then it was not actually until in my early 20s, then I started picking up Dickens and saying, okay, this, I get it now, or better than I did. Yeah. And I've really enjoyed that. So, yeah.
Yeah, because that, being honest with yourself as a reader and saying, not right now, you could have pushed through and then hated the experience, and it would have ruined what was a future favorite book for you. So yeah, I think it's good this is, reading for leisure. Like, there are no rules. And also I think maybe Goodreads and just having some kind of book account makes you feel more like you need to have quantifiable reading. But also sometimes, remember, as a kid, you would just dip in and out of a book, and that was a lovely experience. So yeah, just putting, I guess, less pressure on ourselves as we read.
Right. Yeah. To enjoy what you read. And That's been kind of
Yes.
my motto this year is to just enjoy it. And if you don't enjoy it, find someone who does and give it to them, or
Yes. Yes. Yes.
or
Be a
sure. Sorry.
reading hedonist.
Yeah. There you go.
All right.
All
I have
right.
three more.
Okay.
So another middle grade one. There's just something really um, charming about reading well-written children's books. And this one is particularly good for the end of winter coming into spring because it involves maple syrup.
Mm.
So it is Miracles on Maple Hill by Virginia Sorensen. And it is about a little girl whose father has just come back from World War II and has terrible PTSD.
Mm.
And there's just a pall on the whole household because they don't really know how to interact with him to help him best. And he's frustrated with himself that he is so kind of aloof from his family, but he's dealing with some really, really big things and processing everything that he's seen in the war. And they are given an offer of this house in the countryside on Maple Hill. And so it ends up being this sort of restoration for the family, kind of just being out in the great outdoors. A lot of the day is just really a healing process for them. So there are a couple things. I read this with a few people last year. Like when they first get to the house, there is a mouse family living in the stove, and she is like, "Oh, it's a mouse family!" This little girl, all excited about it.
Yeah.
And her parents kind of immediately burn up the mice. And so I think some people are really traumatized by that. But I think that is more like country life. Like you just
Yeah.
you have to keep the pests out of your home.
Yeah.
So some of the things I think feel a little dated to people. But I just think it has so many winning qualities about it. And just, it really is altogether delightful, kind of getting to see the change of seasons on Maple Hill. And yes, it's a glorious, glorious book.
Sounds great.
And then the last two are a 2-for-1 kind of deal.
All right.
So this is a Newbery winner, and it is called Rabbit Hill. This is another middle grade. And this is about a group of animals who love and adore the family that lives in the house on Rabbit Hill, because the family every year grows a garden and kind of gives the animals a free for all with this garden. And so there's a whole, like, what do I want to say, like a rationing meeting that they have, and each animal group gets to sign up for one of the items that's in the garden. And it's just really funny, like the politics of these woodland animals. But alas, that family moves out, a new family moves in, and they have no idea what they're going to be like, if they're going to let them have kind of free reign in the garden. And then this year, I found on Abe Books the sequel, which I have never read, which is The Tough Winter. So I thought, oh, I need to read this in wintertime. So it just says the animals of Rabbit Hill survive the cold and ice of a Connecticut winter with loving good humor. So I'm hoping to enjoy this one as much as I did the first one. All right. And then lastly is Little Women by Louisa May Alcott. I think some people might feel it is a bit saccharine, but I am just a very sappy person, and I'm very romantic, like Betsy Ray. I really feel like I have the same temperament as her, and so I love to like, oh, this golden sunset, and to stand there and kind of marvel at it. Kind of a bit of Anne Shirley as well. And so I think I think it's bordering on it. I can see how people say that, but to my kind of romantic temperament, I'm like, oh, I just love it. It's just like, a warm hug. But also what I love is seeing these characters. It's a tumultuous time for living in the United States. It's during the Civil War for the first half of it. And then in the second half, something that I just keeps being reestablished to me is being a grown-up is really, really hard.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's just, as much as you hear adults say that, it's just, it doesn't really hit home for you until you are an adult. And even my husband and I have said, actually, we don't think being married is that hard. We think it's just being grown-ups together is the hard part.
Right.
Yeah. So just getting to see them kind of rise above all of the trials that they're going through, and that also really working hard at the significant relationships in your life. And yeah, I love the uniqueness of each sister. And so then the 2-for-1 aspect of this is a lesser known Victorian author that I think if you like Louisa May Alcott and you do find kind of the warmth in her writing, you like that. Charlotte Mary Young would be a good author to try out. So I read during Victober. I think it's my favorite of hers. Well, it's called Heart's Ease, and it is about the second oldest brother in a family. So he's not going to get the family inheritance. He needs to, take it upon himself to figure out a way to earn a living. But he gets married the day his bride turns 16. So they were basically waiting for her to be the legal age. So she is such a baby. But she's incredibly beautiful. And so he brings this young, beautiful, glamorous bride home, and the family's all like, nice to meet you. But then away from her face, they're like, oh my gosh, who is this girl? Obviously I'm paraphrasing. They aren't talking like that in a Victorian novel. But what I love is this book takes place over the course of maybe 6 years. And so they slowly see she is made of sterner stuff than they thought. And how they have this kind of snobbery about her family background, you slowly see over the course of the book, which that's such a theme in a lot of Victorian literature is the background does not make the person. It does not determine their character. You see other characters that have, all of the background and title and wealth, but maybe their character doesn't necessarily correspond. But then she also has, Charlotte Mary Young also has another one that I really enjoyed called The Heir of Redcliffe, which is actually referenced in Little Women.
Yeah.
When Jo is found, she's eating apples and crying while reading The Heir of Redcliffe. So yeah, and what also I really like is contrary to some Victorian authors, which, sorry, Mr. Dickens, she has great disability representation. The characters their disability is a part of their daily life, but it does not limit their intelligence. It does not limit their ability to feel the same depth of feelings as characters who are able-bodied. And I love that about it. So I'm surprised to learn she did not have a disability herself. I think she just had huge empathy. So yes.
Yeah. And what was that book called again? The first one you had mentioned of hers.
Heart's Ease. So it's named, apparently there's a Violet that is called the Heart's Ease. And the main character, who's the young bride, her name is Violet. So I was like, oh that's fun. Beautiful what she did there.
Well, I have to, I'm going to look into that. They both sound really good. I love that you brought up Little Women. That's one of my favorites, in fact.
Really?
And I was introduced to it through the Winona Ryder movie that came out years ago. And
so good.
I had just kind of gotten into classic literature around that time. I was mid to late high school, I think, and my introduction was more starting. I'd watched the film first, and then
same.
Well, now I don't have to read the book. I saw the movie. But my favorite, Emma with Gwyneth Paltrow. I love that movie, and I think those helped when I then went and read the books. Though the adaptations, you can argue whether they're good or not, but they do help if you're struggling. Yeah.
Yes, I am no snob when it comes to watching the film first. And sometimes I know there can be confusing plot elements, but watching the movie first, you can then go into the book being like, oh, okay. And also keeping characters straight. And I love an absolutely adore 3 film versions of Little Women. There's the one from the 40s with June Allison, who makes such a winsome Jo March. And then I love the 90s Winona Ryder one. I especially the Joe and Lori dynamic in that one.
Yeah.
But then I really actually loved the 2019 one as well. Specifically in that one, I think Amy's character really shines.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I actually like that one quite a bit as well. My sister, who is a huge Little Women fan, she hated that movie with a passion. I mean, she about tore me apart when I even mentioned that I liked it. She's almost getting violent. I'm like, okay, calm down.
No, was it the ending that particularly grated on her, or just the whole thing?
I think the ending especially did. But
okay.
Yeah, I think there was a lot to it. So.
I think the what I really kind of, it's like it was almost just too much for me. The kind of like ethereal, almost fairy tale like quality of all the cinematography and the soundtrack. I found it really moving. Now what's funny is I don't want to give spoilers for people, so I'll be vague. What Greta Gerwig did with the ending. What's so funny is Katie from the channel Life Between Words, and she's also on Bookstagram. She went with 2 friends to see it in the theater. And as they walked out, she said, "Oh, I really liked that movie." And the one friend said, "Oh, I can't believe how she changed the ending." And the other friend said, "Oh, I think it's open to interpretation." And so she said, they all 3 came out and they all had a different take on the ending.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think I get the changes in why, or yeah, I can't say much more without giving away spoilers, but just go watch it and enjoy it. Yes. I thought the performances were fantastic.
Yes.
Yeah.
Someone pointed out too before that people really vilify Amy. I mean, the thing that she does when she's not able to go to the event that night is really, really wretched. You really hate Amy in that moment. But they point out her and Joe's temperaments are not actually that different. They just decide that the way that they will have kind of security in life, they go about it a different route. And so that's what I really liked about that, is kind of, yeah, I mean, Amy does have, as my husband's phrase he likes to use, glaring personality flaws. But so does Joe. So I liked that kind of, I feel like it's given, I don't know, kind of a fair treatment to this character that hasn't had it.
Yeah, that book, I find it interesting that there's still, you can even make connections with Little Women to Jane Austen, even about why they marry. Maybe Amy's marrying for, hey, my future is going to be secure if I marry him.
Yes.
It's kind of similarities to Pride and Prejudice with
absolutely.
Is it Charlotte Lucas who?
Yes.
Marries,
and this was, I'm pretty sure this is not in the book, but I love when she comes to tell Lizzie about her choice of marriage, and she says, "Don't you judge me, Lizzie. Don't you dare judge me."
Yeah.
And I'm on like, you go, Charlotte. Like, yeah, it is right. Really easy for a modern day reader or a viewer of the films to be like, I cannot believe she made that decision. But it's really like she would have to be at the mercy of a male relative to take her in, or she would be on the streets or like living in a workhouse. It really could be that bleak.
Right. And yeah, that's, I think sometimes one of our struggles with reading older literature is that we don't understand sometimes we put our standards on them. And
yes,
and that's horrified, to interpret it through that lens.
Yes. Yeah. C.S. Lewis would call that chronological snobbery, which I think is a great term. Like
that's wonderful. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, but yeah, I've enjoyed. I really enjoy Little Women. I read it finally when I was in my early 20s again. that's when I really started getting into classics. But I had got the audiobook, and I was working nights at the time, and had a lot of downtime. I could just listen to audiobooks. So I'm listening to this thing overnight, and just like on the edge of my seat, trying like, what's going to happen next? This is great. Just falling in love with that family and just the story. And I mean, long story short, I've got a video I'm going to be doing here probably in the next month or two, talking about why guys need to read Little Women, men need to read Jane Austen. So I'm going to work on that.
Oh, this is so exciting. And I have a guy friend who he says his favorite book is Anne of Green Gables. And there is, it really is still a thing that men are can have this bias against reading it. And even, where was I reading this? It was I can't even remember what book it was, but it was a female author speaking. And she said, still at author events, men will say to her, like, oh, I don't read books by women. Like, it's just such a big category of people to say that it's not like, oh, I don't read teen romances. No, I don't read books by women. That's a really, a lot of books you're missing out on.
Oh yeah. I mean, I've got Louise Penny right over here. Like,
Yay!
and if I didn't read her, I don't know what my life would be like right now. So no. Okay,
she is.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. I didn't really include any modern mysteries, but she is way up there for me. I really, really just Armand Gamache. I get like teary-eyed just thinking about him, because the further you get into the series, I think he is a character that I think can be really just somebody you want to embody in your everyday life, because he really, when doing the right thing is going to give you a lot of backlash and a lot of people not agreeing with your decision, but still just following kind of your conscience, your convictions. I just love that about him.
When I read a series, I usually only read maybe if there's a lot out, I'll read maybe 1 or 2 a year. If I really like them, I might read 3 or 4, which I've done with Louise Penny. I've read about 4 of hers in 1 year once.
Wow.
But I don't know. I have weird reading habits sometimes, but I don't want to read too many to get, then I won't have any new ones. But then also I realized with one writer, I read a bunch of his all in a row, but then I started being able to predict his patterns.
No.
So, and then it was like, oh, these are kind of getting boring because I know what he's going to do. So I have to slow him down. So I have a little bit of forgetfulness between books, and it's a long process, but yeah.
I mean, that happens to me too, because I don't like to binge series because I burn out on them. So I'm just in the middle of like 20 mystery series, which is outrageous. It is a problem. I need to see some help about it, but it's just, I really like having those characters to come back to later on in the year. So have you read the 6th Armand Gamache?
Yeah. I think I've gone all the way up through till there's 3 or 4 of the newer ones I haven't read yet, but yeah.
Okay. I remember with the 6th one, when there's the big thing that you've been getting hints of happening it's basically like for 3 books, something big is afoot, but you don't know what it is. And I was listening to the audiobook while I was driving, and my heart was just pounding because there's not, I don't know, with like a certain series, you kind of feel safe that the characters are going to stay around. But with that, I just didn't know. So it's a really, really thrilling series.
Yeah, that whole process there, then when he's gravely injured and his partner is gravely injured, and then the fallout of that and how it's spread over books. And then seeing the next book, you see the corruption that's in the Sûreté, and it's so that was a bad decision, because that audiobook I listened to, sometimes I have insomnia, did not help me sleep. No, it doesn't. Yeah. I've been struggling with that insomnia lately myself, and
really,
and it's I got to be careful about what book I read because it doesn't help
Right.
sometimes.
Insomnia is brutal, like, because it's just, I don't usually have fun reading when I have insomnia. Like, I'll do it to make myself more sleepy. But it just, it's brutal.
Yep. Well, it's been a year of experiencing all kinds of physical disasters. So
no fun.
Yeah. All right. Well, thanks again, Kate, for just taking the time to share your favorite books with us and some good cozy reads. So I'm looking forward to settling down here. I got our Christmas decorations up. We're gonna settle down by the tree and read some good stories this year, I think.
Oh, excellent. Yeah, reading by the Christmas tree is a really, really wonderful reading location.
Absolutely. We don't have a fireplace, so that's going to have to do until we get one. Yeah.
You can light a candle, I guess.
That's right. I got some of those. So
Perfect.
All
Perfect.
right.
Well, thank you very much for having me.
You're welcome. Thanks for coming on and keep making those great videos.
Thank you. You too.
All right. Take care.
Thank you.
All right. Let me stop recording.